The story begins with Cairo, a young girl narrating her life, whose parents are not dead, but she is dead for them. Her parents are lawyers and they both work out of the country. Cairo lives alone in an isolated house, and she loves to write and finds peace by writing. Every day she goes to school by herself. She wears a short skirt, high heels, and walks through the forest. After arriving at the school, Cairo meets her teacher, Jonathan. Jonathan is a middle-aged man who once dreamed of becoming a big writer, but he didn't get his wish. Cairo admires Jonathan a lot. While Cairo came to the class early, Jonathan asks her to read the books she has to study for the semester. But Cairo has already read all 12 books that were needed, and it makes Jonathan to admire her ability. Cairo's friend Winnie and Jonathan's student arrive and asks Cairo out to eat together. After the two girls leave the room, Jonathan is curious about Cairo's books, and he checks them on the desk to see what books she is reading. Then a friend of Jonathan, Boris, shows up. He is also a teacher and takes the book Jonathan is reading. He starts reading out loud, and Jonathan wants to stop him from the adult parts not to read it loud, but Boris continues. Then Boris notices another book that written by Jonathan, and Jonathan is surprised that Cairo has his book. Jonathan comes home and finds his wife Beatrice, who is immersed in her work. Then he talks to his wife about his student reading one of his books, and while they are talking, Beatrice receives an urgent call from her colleague. After the call, they drink together, and when they want to spend more romantic time together, Amy calls Beatrice again. Jonathan gets nervous and gives up. The next day, Jonathan tells Boris about his boring weekend and how Amy ruined her romantic moments with Beatrice. Boris mocks Jonathan, then talks about his own life. Just as the two of them were talking, Cairo emerges out of the forest. Jonathan, who is still nervous from the day before, when Cairo approached them, they are looking at her. Cairo, without knowing about the situation, she takes off her headphones and greeted them. Then Boris leaves them alone. Jonathan, who was sexually frustrated, trying to keep his cool and have a normal conversation with her. At the school, when Winnie intentionally dropped her books and stuff in the hallway, Boris approaches her to see what the problem is. When he saw Winnie's chest, he realizes that she wanted to seduce him. Winnie tries to give Cairo some feedback for the article, but Cairo thinks that it is very ordinary. Then Winnie suggests to fool attractive teachers for the essay. Cairo gets very confused because the age gap between them is very big, but Winnie tells her that there is nothing wrong with it. Winnie sees Jonathan a very nice and kind man and a very good choice for a first date, as they both are virgins. Winnie's insistence attracts Cairo's interest more. She teases Cairo of Jonathan, saying the way he looks at her is different, which makes Cairo embarrassed and blushing. After a few days, Cairo's interest in having an intimate relationship increases, and she wants to experience it, so her eyes are on Jonathan to make a move. One day, Jonathan tells her to come to his office after class. In Jonathan's office, he is talking to Boris and asks him to come home for having dinner together with his wife. When Boris leaves, Cairo sees Jonathan doing some kind of dancing. They laugh together and then talk about Winnie, her friend. After that, Jonathan talks about Cairo's situation and congratulates her for one of her recent writings and says that she has some proper skills to become a writer. Then he asks Cairo to write a short story in the style of a writer that she likes, and if it comes out good, she will pass the whole semester with a very good grades. Cairo also accepts this opportunity. Cairo catches her teacher by surprise and says that she has read his book. She reads a part of the book she had memorized, and the teacher is happy and emotional. He says that this was the first book he wrote and it is very important to him. Jonathan says, since he has get married, his life has become very ordinary and he has not been able to write anything. Cairo also challenges him to find something inspiring again and write about it. Jonathan tells her to meet at the weekend to discuss more. At the meeting place, he surprises Cairo from the back and then they start talking. He talks about how to improve his literary skills. A poet named Elliot is performing and Jonathan is listening carefully, whereas Cairo is looking at Jonathan. Then they talk about poetry. Cairo smokes and offers to Jonathan. The next day, Cairo decides to bring some changes to her looks. She buys coffee for Boris and Jonathan and they talk more and everyone smokes together. Later, Cairo tells Winnie that even though Jonathan didn't say anything about her dress, but she knows he liked it. Cairo tells her teacher that she wants to write her story in the style of her favorite authors, Henry Miller, who is famous for writing romantic stories, and he is not very likable by public. Jonathan says that maybe it is not a good idea and the school will cause her problems, controversial stuff they call it. But Cairo promises that her story is getting more interesting if she does so. Jonathan Miller trusts Cairo though, and allows her to write her story however she wants. Then Jonathan's wife sends him a message to go out on the weekend. When Cairo is alone, her friend makes fun of her and says that she wanted to get close to her teacher and she was seducing him. Before leaving, Cairo realizes that her phone is missing. Jonathan's weekend is ruined again by a call from Amy while his wife is talking with Amy. A phone in his bag rings. He is surprised when realizes that Cairo left her phone in his bag. Jonathan agrees to return return Cairo's phone to her place. Although it is raining, Jonathan goes to Cairo and Cairo appears in front of him in a very beautiful dress. They both stare at each other and it rains heavily. Cairo approaches Jonathan and they kiss. The next day, Jonathan is thinking about Cairo where she sends him her midterm exam, the essay she was supposed to write. When Jonathan wants to talk to his wife asks him to leave her alone so that she can get to work. Then Jonathan goes into a shack and starts reading Cairo's writings. The text of the story has scenes for adults and Jonathan imagines Cairo and does the same with himself. The next day, Cairo comes to school in a very attractive dress, but Jonathan's behavior has changed and he doesn't greet her like before. Cairo asks Jonathan if everything is fine. After reading her paper, Jonathan chastises Cairo, calling it inappropriate and demanding she rewrite it or he'll fail her. Cairo tells him she was writing what she knows, their mutual attraction, but he fails to acknowledge that. He says he was foolish for trusting she could write in the style, calling her a child. Cairo says he blurred the line of their relationship in real life, to which Jonathan says she is his student, and that's all, and if she mistook something that's her problem. Cairo then turns on a dime how she sees him and their relationship, calling him a mediocre writer and warning him that if he continues to deny his responsibility in creating the idea of a relationship they had, it will destroy him. So she sets her plan into motion, sharing her story with the school's administrators, which eventually brings Jonathan in front of the school board to explain his actions and threaten his career. However, Cairo does not stop there. When hanging out with her friend Winnie, who for the whole movie has her own flirtation with another teacher, Boris, but not to the extent that Cairo and Jonathan had though, Cairo pressures Winnie, who has been texting Boris, to send him a picture with the two of them making out. Both Cairo and Jonathan speak with the vice principal. Jonathan is suspended. Boris blames him for not knowing where the line is, while he defends his own position with Winnie by saying he recognizes the line and is sure not to cross it. The situation also wrecks Jonathan's relationship with his wife Beatrice. When he comes home and tells his wife that he has been suspended, Beatrice asks if something really happened between him and Cairo. Jonathan denies it, but Beatrice doesn't believe him and she insists on it until finally Jonathan confesses. Beatrice asks if he has feelings for her. When Jonathan makes a max, it causes them to argue and end up breaking up. While Jonathan deserves everything he gets, Cairo does not see herself as a victim. Talking with Winnie about what is happening to Jonathan, Cairo says, "He underestimated me, I overestimated him," and calling the situation an inspiration for her. Winnie thinks Cairo is punishing Jonathan because he wouldn't leave his wife for her and threatening to testify against Cairo. Cairo says if she does, she'll use the photos and texts she has of Winnie and Boris to destroy them both as well. Winnie tells her this isn't a game, to which Cairo agrees, calling it her greatest achievement. She reads a new writing, saying she wanted to experience something new and reached for what Jonathan gave her, but was ultimately made a fool. She wonders if Jonathan will come to realize his own complicity and be changed by it like she has. She describes her youth as being ripped away, but she feels she is shaped into something new, quoting a line from Jonathan's book, "Grown from the human ruins of a madman's love."